My guest today is Melissa Borkowski. She is the co-founder, along with her husband Nick, of Acton Studios of Rochester in Rochester, New York, that is part of the vast Acton Academy network of learner-driven schools serving thousands of learners around the world. And Melissa and Nick just launched Acton Studios of Rochester this fall, September 3rd of 2024, with about six learners with plans to grow leaps and bounds over the coming months. So, Melissa, welcome to the LiberatED podcast.
Thank you so much, Kerry. It's surreal to be here with you. You
Well,
are,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I feel like I would be remiss not to give you a character call out for the work that you're doing. Just in our pre-launch phase, um, it did so many things for me. I feel like, it really inspired me, equipped, and connected us. And, there were some of the episodes that we would listen to where I felt almost, I don't know if jealous is the word, different states, what's going on in different states and different regulatory environments. There'd be moments where you're like, oh, I want to be there doing this. But in every single episode, there was something so inspirational and just that reminded me that we are not alone. And just that was so inspiring to hear just everybody's stories. And there's so much overlap, but it also helped me realize that what we're doing, the acting is different still. And so it was just an amazing um, resource for me to have as we were trying to get off the ground here in New York State. So thank you for
Amazing.
where.
Oh, well, thank you. That's such kind words. I'm so grateful, and just so glad, really, that the podcast could be an inspiration. That's my main goal with doing this is to inspire new founders who might be interested in creating an educational solution in their communities to give it a try through hearing the inspirational stories of others who've already done it. And now you're one of those sort of on the other side who can give inspiration to prospective founders who might follow in your footsteps. But I'd love to hear, Melissa, what made you decide to, well, I guess listen to the podcast or even think about being a school founder?
Yeah, well, I guess, like many of, you know, education entrepreneurs, it was a seed of thought, I think, way beyond, like further back than before we even had children, just kind of coming out of your own experiences. And I don't consider my public school experience a bad one. It's just, I think the way I often explain it to people is if I were to break it apart and sort of dissect it, I think I could build multiple cases for how it didn't necessarily inspire me or equip me, connect me to what I was truly capable of. Um, and, my husband and he had a private school experience. And again, a great experience, nothing that we look back on as negative or bad. But I think when we first met, it was just a conversation that we kept coming back to in planning, wanting to start a family together. And just what we wanted to see for their education. And, his parents, I commend them for they were a very single income, very modest income family. And they put all three of their children through a private education. So education is very important to us. Um, and I think we just both had these feelings of so much real world experience that we just wished we had after all of the time that was and all of the devotion that our parents put into making sure we had a great education. So the conversation that he and I would have so early was always like, let's start a school. Let's just start a school and it'll be a very experiential learning experience where you're just doing all the real world things and from very young ages and still having fun and still learning academics. And then we would kind of like laugh it off and be like, yeah, we're like us start a school, it was kind of a, silly dream, but it would keep circling. It surfaced itself like here and there again. And then after we had children, um, We were in the time frame of needing to decide for our older, he was 4 at the time, and we had a small preschool experience, really just for the experience of being with other peers. I didn't feel I was primarily home with our 2 boys at the time, and we'd cross paths with people out and about, and they'd say, "Is he in school? Is he in school?" And I was like, "Is he supposed to be in school?" Like, I wasn't even thinking that at that time. I was embracing my role as a stay-at-home mom that I had never imagined being. So, but the more I thought about it, I was like, as a stay-at-home mom, I can bring them to the museum and to the, playground and to the, all the zoo, and we can do these awesome experiences, and I can see how they learn and how they socialize. But how would he do in a scenario or a setting with a group of learners without me there, um, for a longer period of time, like a work day, you know? So we were like, let's just see what's out there and we'll see how he does. And it became clear very, very quickly that he learns very differently than my younger son. He's kind of you know, uh, I don't know if whimsical is the word, but he has his kind of wild ways about it, and I love that. But it's challenging when if you're in the mindset of like what is supposed to be done, what he needs to be learning, and when. So all of that was happening, and we had um that was that brought us to March of 2020 when everything, was what it was. And it was truly like a silver lining, I think, for us, where we were like, there's our sign. And there had been multiple signs along the way, a myriad of them. So it was kind of like, okay, this is supposed to happen. We're going to reevaluate. We're going to look into homeschooling. And we're not behind on anything yet because we know that, even homeschooling, you don't need to report for kindergarten. So we're like, we'll have time to find our flow and our rhythm. And almost right around that same time, I listened to the Wellness Mama podcast. So I know that a lot of people have discovered Acton on the Jordan Peterson podcast, and we've heard that one as well. But this was just a little subset of, signs, the Wellness Mama podcast. And it came on my queue in my car with my husband with me. Um, and it was an interview with a fellow founder of Acton. And it just felt like serendipitous. Like, we were just kind of like, wait, we were just talking about something like this again, resurfaced. And so we dove deep into the Acton model, and we just kind of embraced the mindset of, as people we have a tendency to like want to DIY things and you want it to be your own idea, but we were just like, why wouldn't we get on the boat with this model that we believe so like makes so much sense? And so that was what brought us to Acton. And
I
we
love
had a
it.
fairly long launch for, again, several reasons, just little, hiccups, some small hiccups, some bigger ones.
Well,
But,
and COVID, right? I mean, you
and
were kind
COVID.
of deciding to launch in the
Mhm,
middle of COVID,
mhm,
but you applied to become a founder within the Acton Network and were accepted.
mhm.
There's thousands of applications for people interested in becoming founders, and not as many spots available. So it was great that you were able to be accepted into the network. And then what happened next from that acceptance to launch?
Um, well, so we completed um audition, or I mean, we completed the audition, we're accepted, and then orientation, which is such an incredible experience in its own. I've shared with Jeff and Laura, I was like, I would just go through that again and again. Like, it's essentially puts us in the shoes of like a learner. And so it was just an incredible experience. So we felt so motivated. And and then we had one of our holdups was just a personal experience that kind of set us back a bit. And then when we did pick the reins back up, it was an interesting journey. I don't know how much how familiar you are with the regulatory environment of New York State. but that put us in a really interesting spot, and we were learning so much as we went. And in the end, I'm so grateful for where we've gotten to. But um, yeah, it was just in orientation, they ask, we ask these questions like, who am I? Who are we? How can we do this? Or can I do this? And so, as we were going through that regulatory process, and the one thing they ask us not to bring onto the forums makes so much sense, but is regulatory issues because we're such a big network and it's such a robust support system, but regulatory issues are different everywhere. So it would really bog down the system, I think, of how so for how supportive the Acton network is, it was one spot that in the beginning we felt a little bit alone. It was definitely one of our biggest hurdles. But we found as we were navigating how we were going to open, were we going to be a micro school? Were we going to be, my husband kept coming back to thinking we would have to be a co-op. And personally, I was like, I don't want to be a co-op, to operate like a co-op. We have co-ops in our area, and we have wonderful co-ops in our area. So there was no need for that. The need was to bring Acton here, because I think we talked, and I've heard it on your podcast with fellow founders as well. Like, I think we've all done the thing where it's like, consider a relocation to somewhere where it is already, and we definitely went through that as well. Mid pre-launch, while we were like we would get close and then we're like, you know what, maybe we just go do this somewhere else where it would be easier. But my husband kept reminding me, of the posters hanging on the wall, like be the change that you want to see. And um, so let's see the connections. We just started with our, meeting with people, meeting with community leaders, other parents. And once you start connecting, it's just crazy. It's amazing what can happen. And there's such a robust support system out there that want to see more options become available. So, that's where listening to your podcast was so inspiring as well. Because you're like, okay, who can I outreach to, whether we're in the same regulatory environment or not? And that ended up connecting us to um, Yes, Every Kid Foundation. And they like, there were just going to be these people on our journey that we wouldn't have been able to do it without. And they are one of those groups. So we
Amazing.
just
Yeah, that's yeslegal.org, a nonprofit organization that's designed to provide pro bono legal assistance to education entrepreneurs to kind of navigate some of these regulatory requirements and figure out the best way to operate. So I'm so glad that they were helpful for you. And so what was some of the guidance that they gave and what happened next for you?
So we kind of gave them our more concise, pared down like what we're trying to do. Can we bring Acton to New York without being a school? And for 3.5 to 4 days, because that's where you get into like, are we don't want to be a daycare, we don't want to be a school, we don't there are certain requirements that we just don't feel are our place to require, so that we can share this experience. So what they did was they just sort of walked us through, and I'm just so excited about where it's gotten to, because I'll share in a minute, but they reached out to people in our area, um, who, am I allowed, can I mention like names of somebody that helped from Yes Every Foundation, or
I'd probably just keep it
leave it?
general with the
Okay. Okay.
organization. Yeah.
Yes. But so they would give guidance on who to call or what connections to make. And then I would get a call back. We're like, nope, don't you call, I'll call. And that way, we can kind of run it by from like third party. So that was super helpful because I was still just trying to navigate so much, and that's not my wheelhouse. So, um, and they would call like regulators in our area and just run by like what we were trying to do and get helpful guidance to then bring to me, so that we could kind of just powwow on what is our program. And where we ended up was we are a single purpose education program for homeschool families. So our families register as homeschoolers. And they, we are not, I know you're familiar with the Acton model. We aren't instructors. There are no instructors. So a lot of the regula regulations that were making us sort of nervous about 50% or 900 hours or all the different things like that, we aren't that. We aren't instructing hours where this is something that families are choosing. So we're a program that the way they phrased it to me that really helped was, my husband and I are launching a business that delivers the Acton model, and parents are buying into that. And they're still reporting as homeschoolers. And then we help with like things that learners are working on in their time at Acton. So, and again, we're just in the water. So, we'll maybe have to meet again once we like get everything really flowing smoothly. But so far our families are all in. And really just love Acton. One other cool note too, we have a family that just recently finished audition. So we do have a lot of interest. And one of their questions on our follow-up meeting was, I just loved the question, it just keeps circling in my mind, but how did your current founding families come to be? Like, did you know each other from a homeschool group, or did you just know, was it family or friends? And no one had asked me that. And I was like, wow. And it is just 6 learners, and some of them are siblings. So it's just 3 families plus us. So 4 of us. But I was like, no, none of us knew each other from anywhere before Acton. So what was cool about that is I was like, wow, Acton truly brought us together. And it was a fun question to answer, even.
That's
um,
so great.
yeah.
And yeah, I think it just um, speaks to the fact that there are more families in your community who are probably seeking a different kind of learning environment, whether that's the Acton model of learner-driven education or some other kind of innovative learning program that's different from a conventional school, either a conventional public or conventional private school. There's so much interest from families. And so, yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, Melissa. How did you find these founding families and decide to kind of move ahead with them?
Yeah, I think some of it just acknowledging what you just said, like that even though we're in a state that I think is slow to um, there's no school choice even being talked about here yet. So I think it was an interesting place because we didn't really do a lot of marketing because I was nervous about it's not a co-op and we're not a school and we're, it's just an interesting place because you really are looking for families that are in that seek and search process and have maybe already discovered Acton. And so the market, the trying what we want to shout off the rooftops is like, hey, if you know about Acton, we're coming. Like it's here finally. Like, and the families that did come to us had been on the site that Acton has like a site where you can look up your area and just see where some are, and there are some in New York that appear there but haven't launched. And so we were aware of that we tried to reach out to anyone we could that, and I think it was fairly easy to see part of why that was, in just the process we were going through. But um I think a lot of our families had heard the podcast, heard about it on a podcast and just really resonated with it. And I guess maybe this is a silver lining of our fairly long pre-launch, but being able to recognize the question and the interests that do come in if I make a Facebook post or something. That's a challenging place because like I said, there are so many families in that seek and search process, but it's not that Acton can't be for everyone, but it's like you have to embrace that, really embody the model first. It's not just another co-op, um, so I tried to, if I did put out information, really like with a link to go find out what Acton is first, and maybe this will be a great fit for your family. And I think that helped. Um, and it was fairly easy for us to recognize people that were just curious about what is this like, and not really willing to look into the model. Um, so that was a helpful part of the audition for our families, and it's on their application, just like how much research have you done already? Um, and have you read Courage to Grow? Have you listened to the podcast? Have you, so that's a really helpful part of our process, and another tool that Acton kind of equips us with of, how to have families that are a great fit and be a great fit for the families. So
Oh, so great. Yeah, you mentioned Courage to Grow, the book that details the Acton founder story, written by Laura Sandifer, the co-founder, along with her husband Jeff, of Acton Academy, which launched as a single school in Texas in 2009 and now includes over 300 independently operated schools around the world. So just exciting to see that much growth. And I think it also speaks to the fact that micro schools and these other innovative learning models were emerging before 2020. But of course, 2020 was a catalyst for a lot of families, a lot of parents, and educators like you, where that was sort of the final push that you needed to really take the plunge and look for something different or build something different for people in your community. So maybe, Melissa, for those who are not as familiar with the Acton model and the philosophy of learner-driven education that Acton embraces, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it means to you.
yeah, it's a super unique model, really. I think there's a lot that overlaps with a lot of what other, micro schools are doing. Um, and obviously we all share, I think, some similar passions. But I think Acton, what made it's almost radical in a sense. And I think when you have just in life, my husband and I, a little bit, not that we're trying to go against the grain all the time, but we just find that we're like, this is more where we resonate, where our instincts feel like they're pulling us. And I think um the uh one of the biggest things that was super attractive to us about Acton is just the truly learner driven model. And I think there's a lot of talk about, like, child-led education and learner driven and giving choices. But I think to really put it into effect is can be challenging, and to really truly and follow through on it, I guess. And we before we launched Acton, just a quick side note, but we were trying to, when people would ask, like, how are you homeschooling? What curriculum do you use? We always were answering with, like, well, we don't. Like, we're learning all the time. Um, and it was always a little bit awkward, playgrounds, like with other parents that are like, how do you do it? Like, but those are the questions, like, what curriculum do you use? And um, we just weren't driven to following a curriculum. We were just able to see, wow, they truly are, they're learning. And so I think when we learned about Acton, um, and just read about how the approach to that, to just really giving them hard questions to ponder and think about, and to answer and to take a stand and provide evidence to why they feel that way. And always being kind and respectful while you're doing that. So we're not arguing, but we're having challenging conversations. And it just really resonated. I was like, and it's not curriculum based, but we do have learning arcs that we use to go through, have like a system, and the system's in place so that, anything in life like has a system in place. And um So
Yeah,
yeah,
so there are sort of core academic goals that the learners
yeah.
set for themselves and sort of hold themselves accountable to personally and hold each other to, which I think is another really fascinating part of the Acton model is sort of this peer
The peer
governance,
accountability. Yes.
peer
Yeah.
accountability. Yeah, can you talk about that
Mhm.
aspect?
So we, again, as we mentioned, we're just getting up, we're, just have launched. So we are still working toward getting a lot of those systems really like in place. Um, and because of our sort of hybrid approach where we are 3.5 days, but one of those days we also are partnered with a co-op, where they choose some extra classes, they're called. And so we think of those as like electives. So those are have teacher-led classes, but the learners choose. So they choose like 3 to 4 of them. But all of that to say, so our days, our true studio days, are Tuesdays and Wednesdays are our full Acton to the core. Like we have Acton woven into everything we do. So we are still trying to adopt a little bit, make sure that it's not too much too fast. Um, but implement everything as, you know, the playbook says. We're trying to follow the playbook, but so we have not fully implemented that system of peer accountability. But we will be in the next week. The learners right now are working on actually a play. And because like I mentioned, we have actually this won't be true next week, but right now we have a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10-year-old. So,
And what happens next week?
so next week they have their first exhibition. So it's a play, and it is it's the book, The Room on the Broom. So it's a tribe building activity, building the tribe. So their parents and family members will come and view. So it'll be like their first play. And there's no director, so these are learners that have just met each other. So we're in week 8. Um, which on one hand, I'm like, oh, we're only in week 8 to not have all of our systems. And on the other hand, I'm like, oh, we're in week 8. But I'm really trying to give space for that mixed age group to really get to know each other and really build the tribe. And then we'll be launching the journey tracker, which is where the peer accountability and peer reviewing and, there's rubrics and systems that they can use to, look at each other's work. If we do a writer's workshop or a challenge, and then they'll look at each other's work using and we measure excellence by, is this your best work?
Mm.
Is it better than it was the last time? And is it ready for exhibition? Is it ready to be viewed by others? So it's all an effort to help equip them to be able to do world-class work.
Yeah, and one of the great features of Acton is just the vast sort of knowledge base within the Acton Academy Founder Network that you're able to tap into other founders around the world and get encouragement, support, materials, all of those things that enable the launch to be, maybe a little bit smoother and less intimidating than it might otherwise be if you were a micro school founder that's not connected to a larger network. I wonder if you can share a bit about that, what that experience is like for you, kind of being a part of a broader program.
Um, it's amazing. It's overwhelmingly amazing how supportive it is. And fairly recently, they broke us up into geographical zones, because there are so many Actons and it is such a robust, supportive tool. So they broke us into zones. So we are in the northeastern zone. So I think there are 56 of us. And actually, I don't know if that's, at any rate, they've broke us into smaller groups and we have a zone leader. And our zone leader is amazing because I feel like she just does such a great job being Socratic with us, right? So we're not there to just vent, but we allow venting, but we do it in a way of like testimony, shared experience, a tool to share. Um, so they've been one example. So next week I am going to the Northeastern, which I wondered if you would be, the Northeastern first annual Northeastern Hybrid Conference, Micro School Conference, and it's in Philadelphia. And I reached out to the network just to kind of share. I don't know if this is a place that maybe some of us could connect. And we've been trying to put effort into more getting together more often with fellow owners. And so my husband encouraged me, he said, well, while you're there, maybe go see, there's more Actons in that area concentrated than obviously we don't have any near us right now. And he said, maybe you could pop in to a studio, one that's nearby. And so I reached out, our zone leader is about an hour from where the conference will be, and asked if I could just come in and be a fly on the wall. And so she responded like, you'd be welcome to come in. Would you lead a launch? And I was, so as a newer guide, you're like, oh, that's a challenge right now for me. But I had reached out and I agreed to do that, and then had a panic moment and wasn't sure if I was prepared, but I'm choosing to be courageous and push through. And she is like, how can I help? Like, how can, so it's just that reminder, that constant reminder that we're challenging each other within the network, but we're equipping each other so much by doing that. So for what Acton is.
Yeah, and as you were talking, Melissa, it made me think about how you're really exemplifying the hero's journey as a founder. And of course, the hero's journey is sort of a foundational aspect of the Acton model of each learner is on their own hero's journey with all of the challenges and opportunities that that entails. And you as a founder, kind of going through that same process and being courageous as part of that process, which is just really remarkable and inspiring, I'm sure, for many listening. So, what does the future hold for you and for Acton Studios of Rochester? I know you're just a few weeks into your launch, but what do you imagine happening over the coming years, or what do you hope will happen with your program over the coming years?
Well, we hope to, so the way that Rochester is set up, there's kind of, east side, the west side. Um, we are on the east side of Rochester right now, and one of our founding families actually lives on the west side and is making it. So it's about a 30-minute drive, which we are aware Rochester is one of the only cities that complain. No, we don't complain, but a 30-minute drive. But they're doing the round trip and they're doing a lot to make it work because they believe in it. But our hope is to have Acton, which I like, we're Acton Studios of Rochester. So it would be to have multiple studios conveniently located around Rochester and, primarily starting with like an early spark and discovery studio, but having an east side and a west side. And then the idea being to grow into hopefully what would be like equivalent of a middle school that maybe would be more central in Rochester. And then, the high school equivalent is Launchpad. So we'll kind of grow with you know, our inaugural studio. But yeah, we have waves of, where I'm like, let's get our other studio going. But I'm like, wait, we don't have all of our systems in place yet. So we've got to, stay focused on where we are, but that would be our big picture and our,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I think that's a push-pull for founders as well, that you have to be really focused on the day-to-day, kind of practical process of running a small business and launching a school. And then you also, of course, have these bold visions and dreams of what the future of your program can be. So, maintaining that balance, I'm sure, is a challenge. Are you, as you expand into these different studios, are you looking to lease space? Are you looking at private homes? How are you thinking about logistics?
Well, that's funny. My husband and I had a conversation this morning over coffee, but currently we're leasing space in church space. That was some of our advisors, multiple advisors had suggested, that it would be wise to at least check into that space because it is a challenging place. So, and it's working out great. The church that we're in, they are, I mean, advocates for what we're doing. They're excited for we're not affiliated with that church, but they are very eager to see us have success. And in the meantime, my husband, this is like an even pre-Acton, is always looking for land. Always has his eyes out for, he's a very entrepreneurial type. So he's kind of always got different business ideas and good ones. But so we, would love to have our own space and land and be able to incorporate nature into, I think a lot of our families share that passion as well. Like it's Acton all the way to the core, but we believe in, we would love to be able to incorporate a little bit more, some of it being outside, like days where we're outside the whole day. Um, so we will, I think with what I just shared about wanting that east side and west side location to start, um, I think it may end up being more feasible to find a church on the other side initially to lease space, but we would love to have our own land and maybe there'd be a structure and maybe they'd be yurts. I don't know. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I just think your story is so important, Melissa. I mean, you're dealing with a state, New York, that is one of the more regulation heavy states for private schools, for homeschoolers, for education regulations more generally. And you're finding creative ways to navigate that regulatory landscape to still be operating within the existing rules while also maybe encouraging a different way of thinking about education, right? Recognizing that today's educational models don't fit neatly into existing regulatory boxes, and maybe those boxes need to change to reflect micro schools, learning pods, various types of homeschooling collaboratives that are increasingly in demand by families all across the country, including in New York. I think it's wonderful that you're showing how that can be done and certainly leveraging available resources like yeslegal.org to help manage that process as well. So kudos to you for being courageous and really saying, I know this is not going to be easy, but we want to make this happen for our community and inspire others. So I'm grateful for your work. And so if my listeners and viewers want to learn more about Acton Studios of Rochester, follow your journey and your growth to more studios across your city, how can they connect with you?
Um, well, our website is actonroc.org. So it's ACTONROC.org. So no K on there, actonroc.org. And then my email is melissa@actonroc.org. I do have we do have Facebook, and there's a link to our Facebook on our website as well. But like I said, I'm still trying to navigate how I want to best utilize that, and I'll start to, I think post more. But when I first got going, yeah, it was just a lot of our page, not so much on our page, but other homeschool groups where I was trying to sort of get the word out that we were coming. There's a lot of I don't know if scrutiny is the word, curiosity that isn't really relevant to Acton. So I haven't been very active on Facebook. But I will, but our page is there and I am responding, I do anytime we also, one of our founding families, that was our initial connection. So it's, I am present there. I'm just not super active there. So reaching out direct email is always best. But
So actonroc.org is the place to go. I'm so excited to see your progress and follow your journey. And Melissa Burkowski, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
thank you so much, Kerry.